My name is Ed Lyne. I'm a Kerry native and Munster-based archaeologist with some 20 years experience in the field. In 2017, I was given the responsibility by Archaeological Consultancy Services Unit of directing the excavation of a Ringfort site here at Lissaniska, just outside Milltown, County Kerry. In December 2017 and February 2018, an archaeological excavation was carried out here at Lissaniska Ringfort, just west of the village of Milltown in County Kerry. The work was carried out on behalf of Kerry County Council and Transport Infrastructure Ireland as part of the N70 Kilderry Bends Improvement Scheme. The site is located on a ridge which overlooks Castlemaine Harbour to the west, but it's actually on a localised flat and quite wet area which doesn't have particularly good views of the surrounding area. That's despite the fact that there are locations nearby with far better views which would appear to be strategically better places for a ringfort such as this. The name Lissaniska, or Fort of the Water, seems to refer to the site's waterlogged nature, and this is just another reason why, initially at least, it doesn't appear to be a good place for such a site, such a high status ringfort as this. This is another part of the mystery of this site. Although Lissaniska was already a known monument, very little surface evidence for the site survived. Nonetheless, it was identifiable as a multi-vallate enclosure, meaning that it was defined by more than one ditch and bank. This map shows you the location of Lissaniska and its proximity to a second enclosure known as Fort Agnes. This site is also believed to have multiple ditches. Fort Agnes is positioned on sloping ground with a good view of much of the surrounding landscape, including the valley to the north, through which the River Main runs. In this respect, Fort Agnes is located in a more typical location for a ringfort, on sloping ground with a commanding view of the surrounding area. Before any digging commenced at Lissaniska, the site was subject to geophysical survey to find out what might survive below the ground surface. Two remote sensing techniques were used: magnetic gradiometry and resistivity. The results of the geophysics, along with available LiDAR images and aerial photography, confirmed that the ringfort had in fact 3 concentric ditches, making it a trivallate enclosure rather than bivallate as had been thought previously. The next stage in the investigations involved a metal detection survey and hand-dug test trenches. While over 200 objects were found during the metal detection survey, analysis confirmed that these were all modern in date. The test excavations, however, established the width and depth of the ditches of the ringfort and also found that some remains of the associated banks survived between the ditches. Testing also showed that the ditches were heavily waterlogged, resulting in the preservation of some organic material, such as wood, plant, and insect remains. Just over 1/5 of Lissaniska Ringfort lay within the construction area of the new road scheme. This comprised the northern side of the enclosing elements, while the rest of the site, including the interior, would not be impacted by the road development and has been preserved for future generations. Based on radiocarbon dating of samples taken during the excavation, Lissaniska was probably first occupied during the late 7th century AD and continued in use up to the 11th century, a potential span of some 300 to 400 years. The outer ditch encloses an area of about 70 metres in diameter, while the inner ditch encloses a central area with a diameter of about 43 metres. If an inner bank existed, the internal space would have been slightly smaller than this. Ringforts are generally recognised as the defended farmsteads of the early medieval period, where cattle raids or similar attacks could be staved off. Enclosures such as this one, with multiple layers of defence in the form of 2 or 3 concentric ditches, are generally seen as being higher status or even royal sites, as suggested by the historical texts that survive from that era. When the ditches were initially dug, the builders would have placed the excavated material along the inside edge of each ditch, building up banks of clay and stone. These banks had been almost completely levelled over the years and survived to a maximum height of just 25 centimetres, Much of this levelling probably occurred in the 18th or 19th century, when the Godfrey family were carrying out land improvements within their estate. All of the ditches were cut into the underlying bedrock, which helped the creation of U-shaped ditches with mainly flat bases and steep sides. Ridges of bedrock were left in the base of each ditch, presumably to help to manage the flow of water. For example, this might prevent all the water from simply flowing to the lowest part of the ditch. The ditches had no obvious access points or causeways across them, suggesting that such features may survive within the unexcavated portion of the site. While the depth of the outer ditch was relatively consistent at about 1 metre, it varied greatly in width, narrowing from 3 metres wide on the eastern end to just 1 metre wide on the western end. This suggests that the outer ditch was perhaps more symbolic or related to status, as opposed to being truly defensive in nature. This ditch appears to have silted up naturally over time, and it did not contain any artefacts or evidence for rubbish disposal. The middle ditch averaged 3 metres in width and was a little over 1 metre in depth. The fill here also represented mostly sterile layers that formed naturally over time, as well as a thin peaty organic deposit. The inner ditch was the largest and most complex of the 3 ditches. It was just over 5 metres in width and up to 1.65 metres in depth. A series of shallow troughs or ponds had been cut along the outer edge of this ditch, resulting in a stepped profile. The rare discovery of a preserved sheaf of flax, deep in the lower part of the ditch, suggests that these ponds may well have related to flax spreading. After a flax crop was harvested in late summer, it would have been stretched out within these ponds and submerged in water. This was necessary in order to soften the plant so that ultimately the fibre could be separated from the stem. This fibre was then processed further to create linen textile. Three near-complete wooden containers, all made from yew, and several other vessel fragments were recovered from the inner ditch. One was a stave-built vessel and is one of the few complete or mostly complete early medieval examples of this vessel type found in Ireland. The other 2 vessels were each carved from a single piece of wood. One had carved side handles and the other had a single upward projecting handle. These vessels could have been associated with the storage of dairy products or grains, but they could also have been used for the pouring or baling of liquids, perhaps related to the ratting ponds and water management at the site. While the area of excavation at Lissaniska Ringfort was limited, it has nonetheless provided a wealth of organic artefacts as well as evidence for early medieval flax processing for the production of linen. This site remains one of the only early medieval sites in Ireland where flax retting ponds have been identified, and possibly the first such site in all of Munster. The nature of the inner ditch in particular suggests that flax retting was an integral part of the site's function, with the ditch constructed specifically with this in mind. The location of the fort on a flat waterlogged area may have been quite deliberate. The name Lissaniska, the fort of the water, may be an indication that the fort had a very deliberate association with water from the beginning, and it may be that the name dates back to its occupation. Thanks to the level of organic preservation that existed here, Lissaniska provides us with a rare glimpse of early medieval textile working practices. It also gives an indication of the wide range of specialised activities that may have taken place at individual ring forts across Ireland, activities which in many cases may leave very few traces behind.